life didn't happen on stage or on set. It happened on an operating table. Beneath all the red carpet makeup lies a faint scar under her chin, so small you'd miss it unless you knew where to look. That scar holds a story more intense than most Hollywood scripts. Long before the cameras, before the awards, Catherine was just a little girl in Swansea, Wales, fighting for her life. She was a toddler when a severe viral infection closed her throat. Her breathing slowed, her tiny chest struggled, and in a desperate attempt to save her, doctors performed an emergency tracheotomy. That scar is more than skin. It's the first mark of a survivor. It never disappeared. It simply learned to hide beneath beauty, beneath grace, beneath the dazzling image the world would come to adore. Catherine was born on September 25, 1969, into a modest working-class family. Her father owned a bakery. Her mother stitched clothes with quiet determination. Life was simple: narrow streets, early mornings, and second-hand clothes. But Catherine was never ordinary. She sang without asking for permission. She danced in the living room as though the walls couldn't hold her in. Her parents saw it, felt it, and when opportunity knocked, they opened the door. In a stroke of luck, almost too strange to believe, the family won £100,000 in a national lottery. For most, that would mean comfort. For the Zeta-Jones family, it meant transformation. They moved to a better neighborhood, bought a pastry shop, and poured the rest into Catherine's future. Dance lessons, stage coaching, voice training. She had that fire from the start, her father once said. We just gave it air. By age 4, she was performing in church halls. At 11, she played Annie on stage. At 13, she lit up the West End in Bugsy Malone. But every step into the spotlight took her further from the life of a normal child. No lazy afternoons, no mistakes without consequences, just endless rehearsals, long travel days, and the constant pressure to never fail. In 1983, at 14, she auditioned for the national tour of the Pajama Game, directed by Mickey Dolenz of the Monkees. Not only did she get the role, she owned it. She moved to London, trained like a seasoned pro, and by the next year, she faced a decision that would define her life. At just 15 years old, Catherine was offered the lead in the West End production of the Pajama Game. Most teenagers worry about exams. She had to choose between returning to school or risking everything to chase the stage. She chose the stage, not out of recklessness, but because there was no plan B. It was terrifying, dangerous. But Catherine had already lived through more than most could imagine. For her, this wasn't rebellion, it was survival. And through it all, the scar stayed, quiet, almost invisible, but always there, reminding her that her very first breath had been a fight, and her whole life would be one long encore. It wasn't rebellion, it wasn't recklessness, it was surrender to purpose. But purpose alone doesn't guarantee a welcome in Hollywood. In 1990, Catherine Zeta-Jones landed her very first film role in the French production 101 Nights, playing a cinematic Scheherazade. She walked onto that set full of dreams, dreams of magic, beauty, and triumph. But when the curtain lifted, reality was merciless. The film flopped, miserably. It sold under 740 tickets in France, grossed less than $254,000, ranked 78th at the box office. It wasn't just a disappointment, it was a warning shot. Catherine had barely stepped onto the silver screen before being shoved aside, and for a moment, the dream cracked. But instead of retreating in shame, she returned home. Not broken, not beaten, but refocused. Back in England, she rebuilt from the ground up. Then came The Darling Buds of May from 1991 to 1993, her breakthrough on British television. As Mariette, she charmed the entire country. Critics adored her. Audiences embraced her. And piece by piece, she began proving that even if you stumble in your first act, you can still close the show with a standing ovation. Catherine didn't take the easy road. She chose the one lit only by faith, and that faith, tested, bruised, nearly shattered, was about to reveal its worth. When she arrived in America, her resume gleamed with promise. But Hollywood didn't care. Casting agents saw her as just another pretty face with a British accent, a TV darling who didn't quite belong in big-budget films. She took whatever work she could get. Christopher Columbus, The Discovery in 1992, Splitting Heirs in 1993, The Phantom in 1996. Each role was supposed to be a stepping stone. Instead, they became anchors. Reviews were cold. Calls never came. And every audition room felt the same. That silent judgment hanging in the air, whispering, not quite enough. It hurt, deeply. She later admitted, I started to think maybe they were right. Maybe I didn't have what it took. And yet, she kept going. Then came the turning point, one of those moments you'd swear was scripted by fate. Steven Spielberg saw her. Some say it was from the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles. Others claim it was her role in the 1996 miniseries Titanic. But whatever it was, something about her lingered in his mind. And with one phone call, everything shifted. Suddenly, doors opened. Scripts arrived. And in 1998, Catherine found herself fighting for the role of a lifetime. Elena Montero in The Mask of Zorro. But it wasn't handed to her. Far from it. She was up against Penelope Cruz, Shakira, Isabella Scorupco, women already familiar to American audiences. Catherine had to prove she could carry the role, match Antonio Banderas scene for scene, and embody both the elegance and fire the character demanded. So she trained. Hard. Sword fighting, horseback riding, dialect coaching, day after day, injury after injury. She fell off horses, bruised her ribs, her hands bled from hours of sword work, but she refused a stunt double. Every slash, every dodge, every flamenco spin of Elena's skirt, that was Catherine. When the cameras rolled, she didn't just play Elena Montero, she became her. The result? A box office smash. Over $250 million on a $95 million budget. Overnight, Catherine Zeta-Jones wasn't just another actress. She was a global name, a face on every magazine, a guest on every talk show, a fixture on every red carpet. But fame didn't make her arrogant. In fact, it made her cautious. I was terrified I'd wake up and it would all be gone, she confessed. She kept working. In 1999, she starred in Entrapment alongside Sean Connery, cementing herself in pop culture history with that laser beam scene. Her elegance became electric. Critics raved. Audiences couldn't look away. Then came Traffic in 2000, where she shed the glamour to play a drug lord's conflicted wife. The performance was so raw, so unfiltered, it won her a Screen Actors Guild Award and a Golden Globe nomination. But it was 2002 that changed everything. Because in 2002, Catherine Zeta-Jones became Velma Kelly in Chicago. She was pregnant, carrying her daughter, and yet she danced, she sang, she dominated every frame of a film that would go on to win Best Picture at the Academy Awards. When Catherine Zeta-Jones walked on stage to accept her own Oscar for Best Supporting Actress, just 10 days before giving birth, she became something more than a winner. She was a living portrait of strength, one hand on her baby bump, the other clutching gold, the lights reflecting in her eyes like a woman who had finally arrived. I carried more than a child that night, she would later say. I carried every role, every rejection, every doubt that ever haunted me, and I let it all go. But as the applause faded, another story, one of love and risk and relentless scrutiny, was already taking shape. Because in the glittering halls of Hollywood, few relationships have been dissected as fiercely as Catherine Zeta-Jones and Michael Douglas. On the surface, it was a dream. Two Oscar winners, two lives colliding from worlds apart. But underneath, their union was built not just on love, but on loneliness, on fear, on sacrifice. Before Michael, Catherine had known love and heartbreak. Her first serious relationship with British TV presenter John Leslie began with promise. But over time, jealousy and control crept in. Catherine, barely in her 20s, found herself shrinking, her voice smaller, her dreams quieter. She left quietly too. No headlines, no scandal, just a woman carrying invisible scars. Then came Scottish actor Angus MacFadyen, of Braveheart fame. They connected instantly, got engaged in the mid-90s. For a moment, Catherine saw a future. But before the wedding, it unraveled. The reason? She never fully explained. Some loves burn bright but fast, she said years later. Others, you carry like a shadow. And then, 1998, the Deauville Film Festival in France. Michael Douglas was already a legend. 2 Oscars, a Hollywood legacy stretching decades. Catherine was fresh from her breakthrough in The Mask of Zorro, just 28 and radiating the glow of a rising star. He was 53, seasoned, iconic, and by all appearances untouchable. They were introduced, and here's where the legend begins. They shared the same birthday, September 25th. But what Catherine remembers most is Michael's first words to her. "You're going to be the mother of my children." She didn't swoon, she bristled. To her, it sounded arrogant, like a line that had been tested one too many times. She smiled politely and walked away. She thought that was the end. It wasn't. Within days, a bouquet of roses arrived on the set of Entrapment in Scotland. Attached, a handwritten note from Michael, apologetic, playful, sincere. That single gesture cracked the door open. They began talking on the phone. What started as polite exchanges stretched into hours-long conversations about family, childhood, fears, regrets. For 9 months, they spoke across time zones, one in Hollywood, one in Europe, closing a distance that had nothing to do with miles. Then one night, Catherine realized she no longer saw Michael as the icon. She saw him as the man who truly listened. On New Year's Eve, 1999, both sick with the flu, wrapped in blankets in Aspen, Michael pulled out a vintage 10-carat diamond ring. Between sneezes and tissues, Catherine said yes. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. Soon after, they learned she was pregnant. And on November 18th, 2000, in a $1.5 million wedding at New York's Plaza Hotel, Catherine Zeta-Jones married Michael Douglas. She wore a custom Christian LaCroix gown. He wore the smile of a man who couldn't believe his luck. Their newborn son, Dylan, just 3 months old, was cradled in his father's arms. The guest list was a constellation of stars: Tom Hanks, Steven Spielberg, Jennifer Aniston, Sharon Stone. But even amid the grandeur, shadows crept in. Despite selling exclusive photo rights to OK Magazine for $1 million, paparazzi from Hello Magazine infiltrated the wedding, snapping unauthorized pictures. Catherine and Michael sued. The case dragged on for years before ending in a ruling that deemed the invasion insignificant harm. But to Catherine, it was no small thing. Her dream wedding had been trespassed upon. It was the first time she felt the full weight of being a celebrity wife, not just a woman in love. Motherhood brought joy. Dylan was born in 2000. Karis followed in 2003. Determined to protect them from Hollywood's glare, Catherine and Michael moved to Bermuda, where Michael's family had roots. For 6 years, they lived in quiet retreat. No red carpets, no film sets, just the sound of ocean waves and children's laughter. "It was the first time in my life I didn't hear the word action for months," Catherine recalled, "and I loved it. But even in paradise, shadows have a way of finding you." Catherine was now juggling 3 roles that rarely coexist peacefully: Hollywood star, devoted mother, and wife to one of the most famous men alive. The marriage was under constant magnification. The whispers came often, and from every direction. Was it real? Would it last? Was she too young, too ambitious? And sometimes, late at night, in the quiet, she asked herself the same questions. There were nights, she admitted years later, where I'd watch Michael sleeping and think, "Am I enough for this life? Is he enough for me?" Through the noise, the doubt, the headlines that would only grow louder, she clung to something fierce and unshakable: belief, not just in him, but in herself. "Love is not about perfection," she once said. "It's about endurance, forgiveness, and waking up the next day still choosing each other." For Catherine Zeta-Jones, the real wedding wasn't the Plaza Hotel. It was every morning after, every scandal endured, every sacrifice made in silence. Her love story wasn't flawless, but it was real. And for a girl from Swansea who once had nothing but a stage and a scar to her name, that was enough. It's easy to romanticize stardom. Imagine the red carpets, the gowns, the applause. But when the lights go out, the person left behind has to face the shadows no one else can see. After her daughter Karis was born in 2003, Catherine and Michael retreated from the spotlight, moving to Bermuda for privacy. From the outside, it looked perfect. Turquoise seas, soft breezes, freedom from the paparazzi's flash. But inside their oceanfront sanctuary, a storm was brewing. Catherine began experiencing deep mood swings, waves of exhaustion, and long stretches of emotional paralysis no sunshine could cure. She smiled for the cameras, played her roles flawlessly, but inside she was buckling. There were days she couldn't get out of bed, nights she felt like an imposter in her own life. I had to smile at premieres, she later admitted, while I was falling apart inside. The diagnosis, when it came, was quiet but seismic: bipolar II disorder. She told no one at first. The stigma in Hollywood was suffocating. So she endured. She mothered. She acted. She posed. She was everything the world expected, except herself. Then came Michael's private heartbreak. In 2009, his eldest son Cameron was arrested and later sentenced to 5 years in federal prison for drug offenses. The tabloids devoured the story. Catherine, already fragile, became the steady one, shielding her own children, consoling her husband. And then 2010, another blow. Michael was diagnosed with stage 4 throat cancer. She walked hospital corridors with her heart in her throat, holding his hand as chemo drained the man who once filled every room with confidence. Some nights she sat in the dark by his bedside, watching him shiver beneath thin blankets, too weak to speak, too proud to cry. Then, a storm they never saw coming. During an interview, Michael linked his cancer to HPV, a sexually transmitted virus. It was medically possible, yes, but the media pounced, twisting the comment into scandal. Overnight, headlines weren't about survival. They were about speculation, about her. The whispers were cruel, the judgment sharper than any scalpel. Friends say she felt humiliated, like her last shred of privacy had been auctioned off. The world forgot we were just trying to survive, she reportedly told them. Through every treatment, every sleepless night, Catherine stayed. But inside, she was unraveling. It felt like every part of my life was in free fall, she would later say. By 2011, she reached her breaking point. Quietly, without fanfare, she checked into a Connecticut mental health facility for treatment. When the news leaked, she made a choice: to tell her truth. "This is a disorder that affects millions," she said. "I'm not ashamed. Mental health is not something to hide." With that, she didn't just help herself. She helped thousands. Letters poured in from strangers who finally felt seen. But even then, the rumors didn't stop. Whispers of separation, of an ending neither had confirmed yet. Catherine Zeta-Jones was now living in a constant balancing act. Her career, her children, and a marriage always under a microscope. The whispers never stopped. Was this marriage real? Would it last? Was she too young, too ambitious, too visible? And deep down in the quiet moments, she sometimes wondered too. Years later, she admitted there were nights she'd look at Michael Douglas as he slept and think, "Am I enough for this life? Is he enough for me?" But through the noise, the doubts, and the scandals that would come, Catherine clung to something unshakable: belief. Not just in Michael, but in herself. She believed in the quiet power of choosing to stay, even when walking away might have been easier. "Love isn't about perfection," she once said. "It's about endurance, forgiveness, and waking up the next day still choosing each other." For her, the real wedding wasn't the one in the Plaza Hotel. It was every morning after, every headline endured, every sacrifice made in silence. Her love story wasn't picture perfect, but it was real. And for a girl from Swansea who once had nothing but a stage and a scar, that was more than enough. But fame hides what the camera never catches. After the birth of her daughter Karis in 2003, Catherine and Michael moved to Bermuda, a paradise far from Hollywood's flash. To the world, it looked perfect. But behind those ocean views, a silent storm was growing. Catherine was hit by severe mood swings, exhaustion, and emotional paralysis that no amount of sunshine could cure. She smiled at premieres while falling apart inside. The truth came quietly: a diagnosis of bipolar II disorder. She didn't tell anyone at first. In Hollywood, the stigma around mental health was suffocating. She feared judgment, gossip, pity, so she endured in silence, playing the role of the flawless wife, mother, and star, even when she didn't feel like herself. Meanwhile, Michael was fighting his own battles. In 2009, his eldest son Cameron was arrested and sentenced to 5 years in federal prison for drug offenses. The headlines were merciless. Then in 2010, Michael was diagnosed with stage 4 throat cancer. Catherine, already fragile, was suddenly walking cold hospital corridors, holding his hand through brutal treatments. She watched her once invincible husband shiver under thin blankets, too weak to speak. And then, the media delivered a cruel twist. In an interview, Michael suggested his cancer could be linked to HPV. A possibility, yes, but one the press sensationalized and turned into a feeding frenzy. Catherine, blindsided, found herself dragged into a storm she never invited. She felt humiliated, betrayed, exposed. One friend recalled her saying, "The world forgot we were just trying to survive." By 2011, she couldn't bear the weight anymore. Quietly, she checked herself into a mental health facility for treatment. When the news leaked, she made a decision that would change her public image forever. She owned her truth. This is a disorder that affects millions. I'm not ashamed. Mental health is not something to hide. Her honesty broke barriers in Hollywood. Fans flooded her with letters, thanking her for making it okay to not be okay. But the storms weren't over. In 2013, Catherine and Michael announced they were taking time apart. The tabloids erupted with wild theories, but behind closed doors, there was no scandal, just exhaustion. "We needed space to heal," she admitted. For nearly a year, they lived separately. And then, without fanfare, they chose each other again. No press conference, no dramatic reunion, just two hands finding each other in the dark. By 2017, the family was beginning to heal. Cameron was released from prison and became a father himself. But in 2018, another blow. Michael faced allegations of sexual misconduct. Catherine, blindsided again, stood by him in public, but privately, she was shaken. She told friends, "I didn't sign up for perfect. I signed up for love, and love means standing still in the chaos." They endured. By 2020, with their children Dylan and Karis heading to college, Catherine entered what she called their third act. Life was quieter now. Mornings were slower, conversations deeper. Friends recall seeing them barefoot in their living room, slow dancing to an old jazz record. "It wasn't glamorous," one said. "It was peace." Today, at 54, Catherine splits her time between their $33 million villa in Mallorca, Spain, and an apartment in Manhattan overlooking Central Park. The Spanish estate, surrounded by olive trees and ancient stonework, is her sanctuary. Though the headlines have faded, her presence hasn't. She stunned audiences as Morticia Addams in Netflix's Wednesday, proving reinvention is her superpower. She has also built a thriving lifestyle brand, Casa Zeta-Jones, worth millions. Yet she measures her life not in dollars, but in peace. Her marriage, once on the brink, now rests on solid ground. She and Michael live with a little more space between them. "It's not distance," she says. "It's design." Her children are grown, her career is on her own terms, and her battle with bipolar disorder continues. But this time, she doesn't hide. She starts her mornings with lemon water and breathing exercises. She eats clean, meditates, practices yoga. "It's not about chasing youth," she says. "It's about honoring survival." Catherine Zeta-Jones is no longer just a Hollywood star. She is a survivor, a fighter, and a woman who learned to keep dancing through every storm, hand in hand with the man she chose, again and again, no matter how dark the night. In 2013, Catherine Zeta-Jones and Michael Douglas shocked the world. They announced they were taking time apart. The headlines were ruthless. Whispers of betrayal, scandal, and collapse filled every tabloid. But behind closed doors, there was no scandal, only exhaustion. Catherine later admitted, "We needed space to heal. Both of us were broken in different ways." For nearly a year, they lived apart. There were no cameras, no red carpet smiles, just two people quietly trying to find themselves again. And when the year was up, they made a decision. Not for the public, not for the press, but for each other. They chose love again, quietly, without fanfare, without a single stage photo. It wasn't about grand gestures, it was about survival, rebuilding not just a marriage, but their sense of self. Catherine came out of that storm changed, stronger. Her eyes carried shadows, but they also burned with fire. She began speaking openly about her mental health journey. In interviews, she asked, "We talk about cancer openly. We talk about heart disease. Why not mental illness?" She refused to be silent anymore. Her honesty helped others in the industry. What was once a secret became a conversation. What was once shameful became a source of strength. Catherine never claimed to have all the answers, but her authenticity became an answer for countless people suffering in silence. Bipolar disorder doesn't just disappear, but Catherine stopped hiding. Maybe that's the real legacy she's building, not just on screen, but in life. The cracks showed again in 2013. This time, the tabloids went into overdrive. Infidelity rumors, alcohol, betrayal. They demanded answers, but Catherine and Michael stayed silent. And inside that silence, Catherine was falling apart. Those 8 months apart were anything but glamorous. They were lonely, dark, filled with nights staring at the ceiling, questioning her choices, her future, even her worth. One friend recalls Catherine whispering, "You don't stop loving someone just because you're hurting." And so, 8 months later, there were no interviews, no dramatic speeches. Just two hands finding each other in the dark again, choosing love because real love doesn't walk away. By 2017, there was healing in the Douglas family. Michael's son Cameron was released from prison and became a father. For Catherine, who had watched the family suffer, it felt like hope had finally returned. Then 2018 brought a new storm. Michael faced allegations of misconduct. The world watched. Catherine stood by him publicly, but privately, she was devastated. She later said, "I didn't sign up for perfect. I signed up for love, and love means standing still in the chaos." The investigation went nowhere, but the scars stayed. By 2020, the children, Dylan and Karis, left for college. Catherine called it their third act. Life was quieter, slower, more intimate. A friend described seeing them barefoot in the living room, dancing to an old jazz record. "It wasn't glamorous," she said. "It was peace." In a rare interview, Catherine reflected, "I've been many things: daughter, wife, mother, star. But now I just want to be still. I want to be whole." Today now, at 54, Catherine spends her time between a $33 million Spanish villa and a Manhattan apartment overlooking Central Park. The villa, surrounded by olive trees and ancient stone, is her sanctuary. She still commands attention when she chooses to appear, like in 2022, when she stunned Netflix audiences as Morticia Addams in Wednesday. In 2021, a photo of her with daughter Karis went viral. The resemblance was so striking, it was like seeing Catherine through time. She's also built a second empire, her lifestyle brand, Casa Zeta-Jones. Home decor, fashion, luxury bedding, each piece reflecting her timeless taste. She's worth around $150 million, but money isn't her measure of success. She once told a magazine, "A beautiful home is only beautiful if it holds peace." Her marriage now lives on steadier ground. She and Michael give each other space, sometimes living apart, but always calling each other home. Catherine is still a devoted mother. Her Instagram shows quiet mornings, family dinners, and jazz-filled nights. Her battle with bipolar disorder still lingers. She follows a strict wellness routine, yoga, meditation, and healthy eating, not to chase youth, but to honor survival. Her face shows the glow of self-respect, not surgery. She refuses to let fear run her life. Catherine has set up trusts and legacy plans for her family in the arts. She supports young Welsh actors through scholarships. When asked what scares her now, she replied, "Wasting time. That's the only thing I don't have an endless supply of." She still carries the whispers, the broken moments, the stigma of mental illness, but she carries them like a dancer holds her posture, strong spine, soft eyes. And maybe the most powerful image isn't from a movie. It's a paparazzi photo of her on a balcony, barefoot in a linen robe, hair messy, sipping coffee with the morning sun on her cheek. No makeup, no pose. Just a woman who learned how to live. From a lottery ticket in Swansea to the Oscars. Catherine's story isn't about luck. It's about defiance, persistence, and believing in her own voice. She was never just a beautiful face. She was the girl who learned to fight for breath, the woman who stood up in public after breaking in private. Life gave her a stage, but she built the performance from pain, persistence, and power. And for anyone watching who's still in the middle of their own storm, this is your sign to keep going. Catherine's legacy isn't just in awards. It's in the way she made survival look graceful, even when it wasn't. Strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, "Keep going." So to Catherine, thank you for surviving. Thank you for rising. And thank you for showing the world that even in life's quietest moments, it's still worth the fight.